Welcome to this training video, which is going to talk about rotors within Care Control. This video will focus on the concepts of rotors and how they work. Before we start to look at how rotors work within Care Control, it is worth just considering why we need to manage the staff rotors at all. We must remember, staff make up by far the biggest cost for any care home. This cost could be between 40 and 80% of the care home's turnover. By maintaining an accurate record of who is working, you can ensure that you have the correct number of staff for the residents under your care. Staff are aware who is working when, who their colleagues will be. You are able to allocate residents to specific staff members ahead of time. That you know when you have a shortfall in staff in good time. That your staff costs are clear and under control. That your visibility of agency workers used is clear and under control. Having control of staff costs and staff attendance is critical to the successful operation of a care home. Rotors in Care Control are based on a fixed 4-week rotation. They are not date specific. They run continuously until they are changed. They are used to provide a template of the hours that are needed. They provide a true reflection of the staff costs, and they can include placeholder staff if not all the shifts can be assigned. Changes are then made to this rotor. Changes are date specific. Adjustments plus the rotor equals the real working situation. Adjustments can include all absence types, shadow shifts, etc. A rotor in Care Control is created using a template we call a model. The model lets you experiment to get the right hours for your staff ratios. Tools are in place to help you ensure that all hours needed are in place. Your rotor model must be based on a 4-week rotation. If you work on a 2-week rotor, weeks 1 and 3 and weeks 2 and 4 will be the same. Once you are ready, you process your rotor into live. Your rotor can only go live on a Sunday or a Monday. You cannot change a live rotor, you can only change a rotor model. It is important to understand that your rotor runs continuously until it is changed. You set in the system a first rotor start date. This is the date that defines your rotor week 1. From this date, all other rotor weeks are defined. If you set your first rotor start date to Sunday the 5th of June, your rotor will rotate weeks 1, 2, 3, 4 from this date, meaning that the 23rd of October, in this example, will be rotor week 1. Okay, to recap, a rotor is created using a rotor model. The rotor runs continuously from a set start date until it is changed. You cannot change a live rotor, you can only replace it with a new rotor model. Rotors go live on Sundays or Mondays, whichever your organisation uses. You make adjustments to the rotor to reflect what has really happened. You must work on a 4-week rotation. You can include staff placeholders if you do not have enough staff to fix onto the rotor. You should include all required hours to provide an accurate staff cost. You cannot change a live rotor, you can only change a rotor model. Welcome to the second part of Lesson 1 of Understanding Rotors. This lesson is about making changes to your rotor. Your rotor will need to be changed on a regular basis. Changes include absences, staff swapping shifts, shadow shifts, extra additional shifts, holidays, and split shifts. All changes are date specific. The changes are added to your rotor to provide you with the reality of what is actually happening. When we look at the rotor and then we add the changes, we create what we call on Care Control a consolidated rotor. This is a version of the rotor which is reality. This is exactly what has happened to the staff that worked in those days. The consolidated rotor is a view of your rotor with all changes included. It is date specific. If you are an administrator, you can also make changes directly on the consolidated rotor. It displays the cover shifts required. Different homes will need to make more or less changes. It is common for the consolidated rotor to be changed every day. Okay, some examples. Care Home A, they have lots of transient staff, agency workers, etc. They'll create a rotor with mainly placeholder staff. these staff are marked as absent in the system. When the rotor is placed into live, these shifts are all marked to be covered. The manager then covers these shifts via the Consolidated Rotor. Care Home B, well, they have staff who want to work irregular rotated shifts. They create a rotor with shifts allocated to these staff members. The manager then records any changes to this fixed rotor via the Consolidated Rotor. This video discusses the system settings associated with rotors within Care Control. To access these settings, you need to be an administrator who has access to Care Control windows. Once your system is loaded, go to the Advanced Stuff tab and then select System Settings. Select the Rotors and Pay tab. You will see on this screen a number of options with regards to setting up your rotor. The most important option is for you to select the date for when Rotor Week 1 will start. The rotors within Care Control rotate on a 4-weekly basis. You should set your Rotor Week 1 to a date in the past, which means that on rotation the rotor weeks will be correct. For example, if you set your first Rotor Week 1 to start on the 1st of August, Rotor Week 2 will start on the 8th of August, Rotor Week 3 will start on the 15th of August. It does not matter how far back you go in time to set your rotor first start date, as once set, the rotors will simply rotate from this date. Another important option on this screen is which will be your rotor start day. You can select Monday or Sunday. This is the day of the week which your rotor will start from. The staff ratio check interval is a performance setting. A higher value will result in a faster assessment time for when you run the ratio analysis report. Include hours on finance report is to do with pay and not covered in this video. Allow historical rotor submissions is a setting that you should only change when you first use a system. If set to yes, you will be able to overwrite an existing rotor. This is not recommended once a rotor has been established, as you may get unusual results. What rotor view should staff see? This is an option to show your staff either the rotor or the rotor including cover, something we call the Consolidated Rotor. How many weeks can staff view the rotor? Set this option to stop staff seeing too far ahead. For example, you may not want your staff to see who is working at Christmas time. Finally, we have the default shift owner. When you add an extra shift to the rotor, this must belong to someone. This is where you can define who will own that shift. We will use this setting later in these videos. Once you have made the changes that you require, hit Save Changes and confirm the prompt that you do want to save them. This will return you back to the Administration Center. As part of preparing to create your first rotor, it may be wise to create a placeholder staff member. This is a staff member that you will use on your rotor to assign shifts that you are unable to assign to actual staff. To do this, you simply need to go to the Add Edit Staff Member option and then select Add New Staff Member. You then need to complete the record with a name that makes it clear that this is a placeholder staff. Some care homes may use Carer 1, or in this example, we are going to use Placeholder 1. It is important that you select the correct role for this placeholder staff member, as later, when we are creating your rotor, you will have display groups that split the rotor based on role or staff category. Once you have filled out your record, select Save Changes. You can then check to see if your new staff record is listed. Once you have created a placeholder staff member, you should remember to always mark them off as absent. This will ensure that if you ever assign any shifts to this staff member on your rotor, they will always be marked for cover. To do this, from the Common Options screen, select Record Absence. make sure you have selected the placeholder staff member from the list. Select Rota Change as the absent reason. Importantly, select the start date and end date some way into the future. In this example, we are recording an end date 2 years ahead of time. When you are finished, select Process Absence. You may get a warning if you entered a start date prior to today's date. Confirm yes and the screen will close. The final piece of configuration we need to complete before we can start to create our first rotor is to check that the rotor display groups are set up correctly. Within Care Control, the rotors are stored in one large group. However, when you are working on your rotor, you may want to view the rotor by different groups of staff. For example, you may want to split out your kitchen staff from your care staff, etc. You can create up to 10 rotor display groups. These groups are defined by either staff categories or staff roles. You can edit the staff that are assigned to each group by selecting the Edit button on the far right hand side. This will bring up the staff assignment screen. From this screen you can remove and/or add staff roles/categories to ensure that your group will contain the staff that you require. Once you have finished, click Save Allocation and your window will close. Close all your windows once you have finished configuring your rotor display groups. We are now ready to create our first rotor model. To do this, you need to go to Rotors and Payroll and then select Work with Rotors. When the rotor screen loads, you'll notice your live rotors are listed at the top. In the middle of the screen are your rotor models. To create a rotor model, you select Add New Rotor Model from the options just below the rotor model list. The new rotor model screen has 3 options. You can select a completely blank rotor model. You can select to base your rotor model on an existing copy of the live rotor. This is useful when you go forward when you're just trying to make a small change to the rotor that's in live. You can even select to base your rotor model on another rotor model. In this example, we will create a completely blank rotor model. We must then enter a rotor model name, and when we're happy, we're going to select Create Rotor Model. When your rotor model has loaded, you will see a screen that is shown in this video. You can change the rotor display groups. In this example, we're going to work within the care staff group, so we select that group from the list. Remember, when you start adding a staff to your rotor model, the staff you can select from will be dependent upon the rotor display group you are working in. In this example, as we are working within the care staff group, only care staff are listed to add to the rotor model. You can also navigate to a different model from this screen. So let's add our first staff member. Select Add Row from the bottom of the screen. A row will be created. This is where you can select the staff member from the list. We are now going to start to add the rotor entries for that staff member. The rotor entry is always in a 24-hour clock. When you have finished entering a value, simply tap Tab on your keyboard to move to the next cell. When you have finished entering your row, you must select Recalculate and Save Model to store that entry. We recommend that you save your model often to prevent any data loss. Remember, your rotor model is built over a 4-week rotation. We are only currently working on week 1. To move to week 2, you select the right arrow at the top right of the screen. We can now add another staff row to week 2. Again, select Add Row, select the staff member and enter the rota values. Remember to save any entries that you make. In this video we will learn how we can copy rota weeks. In our rota model we have created a staff record in week 1 and another in week 2. However, all rotas within Care Control run off a 4-week rotation. So if we are going to run on a 2-week rotation, then we must make week 1 be the same as week 3 and week 2 be the same as week 4. You can easily do this within Care Control by selecting the Copy Week option at the top of the Rota model screen. When the Copy Rota model week screen loads, you'll have two options. Either you can copy your existing week across all other weeks, or you can copy it across a specific week. In this example, we will copy week 1 to week 3. We are then going to do the same for week 2 and copy this week to week 4. We will then have a 4-week rota. We are now going to enter the rest of our rota. This part of the video has been sped up to save some time. We now have a rota that we think covers all shifts for a 4-week rotation. We have now created our first complete rota model. We're going to review some of the other tools you can use to ensure the rota is correct. First, we're going to make sure that the staff grouping on the rota is correct. You may want to group your rota so that staff who are working nights or staff who are more senior, such as shift leads, are positioned consistently on the rota. You can reorder your staff by selecting the staff record and the info button. When the staff information screen loads, you will see a rota display order. This is the field that defines where on the rota the staff member will reside. A higher number will move the staff member to the top, a lower number will move the staff member down. In this example, we want to move Helen James, a night worker on our rota, to be alongside the other night worker, Chrissy Smith. Hence we entered a higher number. Another useful tool we can use is called the duplicate row. If you select a staff member and then select the duplicate button, the system will copy that selected row for you. You can then change the name of the staff member to a different name, save the rota, and you have very quickly created 2 extra lines. This is a useful tool if in your home you have many staff working similar shift patterns. In our example, we are going to remove this extra row, as it is not needed. We do this by selecting the staff record, select Remove, and then save our rota. Other tools that are useful include the ability to print some or all of the rota model. You may want to model out some of the shifts for a new staff member. You can do this by selecting the staff member row and then selecting the print button. When the print screen loads, you have 3 options. The first option will print out a copy of the entire rota model. The second option will print out a copy of the rota model for that selected staff member only. The third option will print out where the changes have occurred to an existing rota which is currently in live. This is useful because on large rotas you can sometimes get lost on what you have changed. In this example, we have selected Jen Jones from our rotor model. We are going to print out her rotor only by selecting the second option. The system will prompt you asking if you want to include financial values in the rotor print. If you say yes, these will be included. In our example, we are printing to a PDF printer, so we can show you the printout in this video. Your system may print out direct onto paper. We are now going to explore some of the other tools you can use to ensure that your rotor model is complete. Remember, our objective is to have a rotor model where every shift is recorded, even shifts we do not yet know who will work. The first tool you can use is the Day Analysis tool. Simply click on the day value at the top of the screen. This will then open up the analysis for that day. You will see how the day is broken down by hour. You can see of the staff members listed which staff members are working at which time. If you scroll down this page, you will see how many of a particular staff type are working. You can also look at this information from a night perspective. You can check each day on your rota using this method if you desire. The other important tool is the totals for each day. In this example, you will see the total staff hours total is 24 for each day. This is useful in informing us if the total staff hours are correct. Another really useful tool is called the ratio analysis. Before you can use it, you first must create a ratio analysis dataset. You do this by selecting Work with Rotors, Manage Staff Ratio Sets. Select Add New and enter a name for your dataset. You can have lots of different sets which can be used for different occupancy levels. You can now enter an analysis line. Enter a description, assign a staff grouping based on the role or category of the staff, enter the day of the week this analysis will relate to, the shift details, and the number of staff you expect to be working between those shift times. You can enter as many analysis lines as you want to ensure that you reflect the correct staff ratios for your organisation on those particular days. When you are happy, select Save Ratio Set. We are now going to analyse our rotor model with our ratio set to see if there are any missing shifts in our rotated weeks. First, load your rotor model by selecting it and then clicking on View Process Model. Once our model is loaded, we move our view to the Care display group. We are then going to expand the bottom part of the screen and then expand further the bottom right hand side of the screen. Here you will see a list of ratio sets you can run against your model. Select the ratio set and then select Load. The analysis will be shown below. On our example, the analysis has highlighted that we are missing one member of staff on a Friday, week 2, between the hours of 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. If we move to that position on our model, we can see that the analysis is correct. We can correct this error by adding this missing shift to our placeholder staff member. Remember, we want to try and create a complete rotor model, even at this stage that we don't know who will be doing all of the shifts. In our example, we move our placeholder staff member to the foot of the rotor by changing the rotor display order value. We are now ready to process our rotor model into live. Load your rotor model. Once it has been loaded, select Process Model. Select the date that you want your rotor model to become live. This will be a date that is the next available date based on your rota weekday. For example, if your first working day of your rota is a Sunday, these dates will be Sundays from the next available Sunday. Remember, the date you select is not relevant to the rota week. The system will work out the rota week based on the first rota week value you entered into your system settings. If you have set to allow historic rota submissions, you will be able to select a date that is in the past. However, we do not recommend this. Use the rota adjustment tools discussed in the next lesson to make adjustments to an existing live rota. Only process a rota model forwards in time. You will now see that your new rota has become live from the date you selected. You can view your live rota by selecting it from the top window and clicking on View Rota. This video will start to explore how you can make adjustments to a process rota. The most common adjustment you will need to make is to mark a staff member as absent. To do this, you need to navigate to the Record Absence screen. There is a shortcut option to this screen on the Common Options tab, and also a button on the Rota and Payroll tab. Select Record an Absence and the following screen will appear. To use this screen, you need to first select the staff member that is going to be absent. Use the drop-down list to find your staff member. Select your reason code. The reason codes are shown on the screen. Note, this is not the screen to book a staff member's absent through holiday. That is a different screen. Enter your start and end dates for the absence. The system will automatically calculate which shifts are affected based on the rotas you have processed into live. Note, you can enter a retrospective start date if you wish. At this point, you can either choose to cover the shifts, leave them blank, or mark them as cover not required. If you do leave them blank, the shifts will be flagged as requiring cover on the various rota view screens on Care Control. When you are happy with the information is correct, please select Process Absence. In this video, we are going to look at another way of adjusting a process rota by adding a shift. This option is available in the Common Options tab and the Rotas and Payroll tab. Select the Add a Shift option and the screen will load. Any shift that you add on Care Control must have an owner. This is the person that the shift is assigned to. In practice, this means that this person is absent for the day, as we are actually adding an extra shift to that person's rota. It is best to use a staff member that does not normally work on the rota to ensure that you do not have any issues. You can change the owner of the shift by selecting Change option. You can also change the default owner in System Settings. You next need to select the date that you will be adding the shift to. You then select the shift itself. Either select it from the drop-down list of Save Shift values, or you can enter the shift value yourself. The Save Shift value list can be amended, and we will look at that in a later video. You now have two optional entries. If you know who will be working the shift, you can select the name from the list now. If you do not, then leave this field blank. The Rota allocation group is if you are using automatic allocations, and we are not discussing allocations in this video. When you are happy, select Add Extra Shift and your shift will be entered. In this video, we will discuss how you can cancel an absence. You can access the screen to cancel an absence through the Historic Absence tab. Select Historic Absence from the Rotas and Payroll tab. Your list of absences will be shown. Select the absence you want to cancel and then select Cancel Absence. When you cancel an absence, all information about who was covering that shift will also be removed. We are now going to look at the Consolidated Rotor. The Consolidated Rotor is the primary way of viewing your rota together with any adjustments. The Consolidated Rotor is a date-specific view of your rotor. You have the ability to change your rotor display group and move to different weeks. The main section of the Consolidated Rotor shows the staff that are working from that display group and includes any staff covering shifts. The shifts being covered are shown in yellow with red text. Each day of the week can be clicked on to get a view of who is working on any particular day. The top section shows you how many hours of cover are required. In this example, the total hours is shown as 13. You can expand and view this section by clicking on the Expand/Collapse button. If you view a day where you have cover shifts required, the daily view will clearly show those shifts' details. This is the view that staff will see on their various systems. We are now going to explore some further features with regards to the Consolidated Rotor. When looking at the rotor, if you select a staff member's name, the staff information screen will be shown. From this screen you can adjust the hourly rate, change the rotor display order, and enter notes pertinent to this staff member with regards to the rotor. To simply record an absence, you can click on any shift in the main body of the rotor. The record absence screen will be shown with many of the fields pre-completed. Enter the reason type and description and process the absence through. This shift now will be marked as shifts per cover. These are shown at the top of the screen. To process a simple cover, simply click this shift and the cover shift screen will be shown. This screen shows the absence details at the top of the screen and provides you with the ability to cover that absence with staff members at the bottom. In this example, we're going to select Helen James to cover this shift. Once the shift has been covered, you will see that Helen's name is now being shown on the Consolidated Rotor. The shift she is covering is in yellow, meaning it is a cover shift. To cancel a cover, simply click the cover shift in yellow and the cover shift screen will be shown again. Change the cover name to Please Select and select Process. This will cancel the cover. We are now going to look at more advanced features of the Consolidated Rotor. You may on occasions need to split a cover shift between one or more staff members. Remember, we are trying to maintain an accurate record of the staff attending work and the shifts they are working. In this example, we have a staff member absent called Jen Jones. However, she has now telephoned work to say that she is actually able to work until 1 p.m. We need to adjust the cover. If we select the cover value, the cover shift screen will be shown. The top half of the screen shows a staff member who is absent. The bottom section is where we define who is covering the shift. What we actually need to do in this example is for Jen Jones herself to cover up until 1 p.m. Then the remainder of the shift needs to be available for other people to cover. The names listed of the available staff will only be staff who are not working or not absent. We cannot select Jen Jones' name, as she is currently marked as absent for this day. To select her name, we must first check the box marked Show Me All Staff. We can now select Jen Jones from the list. The next thing we must do is to adjust the cover value. Jen has said that she can only work until 1 p.m. We must adjust the cover to the correct shift, 07:30 until 1 p.m. When we tab to the next field, we will then get two options. At this point, we can either split the shift so that further shifts can be covered, or we can mark the remainder as cover not required. Cover not required shifts will not be shown to staff members as available shifts. For this example, we will split the shift as we want to cover the remainder. Once the cover has been processed, you will see that your consolidated rotor has now been updated. Jen Jones is now covering her own shift up until 1 p.m, shown in yellow. The remainder of the cover, a 1 to 4 shift, is available for further cover. In this example, a second member of staff, Stephen Jones, has said they can work a 2 to 4. To enter this cover, we select the remaining cover again. We repeat our previous process, selecting the staff member who will be doing the cover and adjusting the cover shift value if it needs to be adjusted. However, in this case, we're going to mark the remainder of the cover as not required. You can now see that the consolidated rotor has been updated to reflect the shifts that each staff member has been able to work.